Chapter 1. Coming Home. The road into Oak Hill curved like a ribbon through gold and rust-red trees, the pavement glittering with fallen leaves that danced in the afternoon light. Lisa Brandt rolled down her window and breathed in the crisp air that smelled faintly of wood smoke and apples. It had been 5 years since she'd driven this road, 5 years since she'd left the small Massachusetts town swearing she wouldn't come back until she had a career and a plan. Well, she had half a plan now. And a job that had recently vanished like last autumn's leaves. But as Oak Hill came into view, tucked into the valley below, with its tidy shops, church steeple, and the giant oak rising like a guardian over the town square, Lisa felt her heart unclench for the first time in months. "Still standing, old friend," she murmured, smiling at the sight of the ancient tree. Its branches were sprawling and strong, though, maybe not as green as she remembered. The radio crackled, playing an old folk song about harvest and homecoming, and she turned it down as she pulled onto Main Street. Every lamppost was wrapped with garlands of dried corn husks and twinkle lights. Shop windows advertised pumpkin pies half price, and Feast of Oak Hill. Volunteers needed. Yep, the town hadn't changed a bit. Lisa parked in front of her grandmother's house, a white clapboard home with a slanted porch and a yard overflowing with marigolds that stubbornly refused to die, even this late in November. The door swung open before she could knock. "Lisa Grace Brandt," came the familiar voice. "Hi, Grandma Emma." Lisa laughed as she was pulled into a hug that smelled of flour and cinnamon. Emma stepped back, hands on hips, eyes twinkling. "You look like a city girl now. What happened to the flannel and ponytail?" "I traded them for deadlines and caffeine." "Well, trade them back," Emma said briskly, taking her suitcase. "We've got cornbread to bake and tablecloths to iron. The feast is in 4 days and the committee's falling apart without me. I told them my granddaughter the botanist is coming home and maybe you can figure out what's wrong with that oak tree." Lisa blinked. "The oak? What's wrong with it?" Emma's smile faltered. "It's thinning out, dropping leaves early. People are whispering again. You know how they get." "Superstitious? Sentimental," Emma corrected. "That tree's been our good luck charm for generations. No Feast of Oak Hill without it." Lisa smiled softly, remembering all those childhood Thanksgivings under the oak's golden canopy. The laughter, the lanterns, the way the leaves used to fall like blessings onto the tables below. "I'll take a look," she promised. Maybe it's just stressed from the dry summer. But later that evening, as she walked to the town square with a thermos of cocoa, the air had that still, listening quality that makes even small noises sound too loud. The oak stood in the middle of the square, its branches bare and dark against the fading sky. When she placed her hand on the bark, she felt a faint warmth, or maybe it was her imagination. The wood was rough and familiar, but where the moonlight hit, she saw something strange, thin, twisting lines beneath the surface, like carvings trying to push their way outward. Her breath caught. "That's new." The wind picked up, swirling the last leaves around her feet. Somewhere, a church bell rang 6 times, echoing through the quiet town. Lisa stepped back, the thermos warm in her hands, and looked up at the vast branches arching overhead. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I'm home now. We'll figure this out." The oak didn't answer, but for a heartbeat, she could have sworn one leaf trembled loose and drifted down to land right at her feet. The next morning, sunlight filtered through Grandma Emma's kitchen windows, falling across bowls of peeled apples, half-rolled pie crust, and a stack of index cards labeled feast assignments. The whole room smelled like cinnamon, coffee, and mild chaos. Lisa poured herself a mug of coffee and leaned against the counter. "You weren't kidding about the committee falling apart," she said, eyeing the papers. Emma snorted. "Half the volunteers are down with colds, the others are arguing over who gets to make the mashed potatoes. And don't get me started on the decorations. Half of them blew away in last week's windstorm. Mark Weston's been trying to fix the booths in the square, but the poor boy's only got 2 hands." Lisa looked up. "Mark Weston? I remember him. He was a year ahead of me, right? Always building something?" "The same," Emma said. "Runs his dad's carpentry shop now. Good man. Quiet, though, since his wife passed." Her voice softened on the last words. Lisa nodded, her chest tightening with sympathy. She remembered Mark's steady kindness back in high school. He'd once helped her build a treehouse out behind her grandmother's barn. He'd even carved their initials into one of the beams. LB plus MWA, completely innocent act that had still made 16-year-old Lisa blush for a week. She took another sip of coffee. "Maybe I'll stop by the square later and see if he needs a hand." By late morning, the town square was alive with activity. Kids were running around with strings of paper leaves, shopkeepers were hanging banners, and in the center stood the great oak, towering, ancient, and tired. Its bark looked darker than before, almost bruised. And beneath it, those faint markings Lisa had seen last night were clearer in the daylight, not random lines, but winding shapes, like roots or vines pressed just under the surface. "Hey there, stranger." She turned to see Mark leaning against a sawhorse, sawdust dusting his flannel shirt. His hair was shorter now, streaked with a hint of silver at the temples, but his smile was exactly the same, quiet, genuine, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Hey, Mark," she said. "Grandma Emma says you're single-handedly saving the feast." "Ha, more like single-handedly making sure it doesn't collapse on anyone." "You're back for the holiday?" "Yeah, temporarily. Maybe. Depends how the town feels about overqualified botanists." He chuckled. "If you can make the oak look less like it's dying, I'd say you've got a permanent job." Lisa stepped closer to the tree. "So everyone's noticed it too?" "Hard not to," he said. "Started a few weeks ago. Leaves dropped early, and the bark's been splitting in places. I checked for rot or beetles, but nothing obvious. It's like the life just went out of it." She crouched, brushing away fallen leaves. The soil was dry but not parched. "Could be water flow," she murmured. "I remember the roots used to reach down toward the old creek." "What happened to that?" Mark gestured toward the east side of town. "The council filled part of it in last year. Said it was unsafe. Kids kept playing near it." Lisa frowned. "So they cut off its water source." "Maybe," he said, glancing at the carvings. "Though that doesn't explain those." She traced one of the faint lines with her fingertip. "It almost looks like the bark's growing a pattern." He smiled a little. "You're gonna tell me it's fungus, aren't you?" "Maybe," she said, but she wasn't sure. The markings pulsed faintly in the light, almost like veins. She pulled her hand back. "Or maybe stress can make a tree do strange things." Mark tilted his head. "You sound like my grandmother used to. She'd say trees have moods." Lisa smiled. "Maybe they do." They stood in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who don't need to fill every space with words. Finally, Mark nodded toward the oak. "If you figure it out, let me know. This old tree's kind of our town's heart. Feels wrong seeing it fade." "I'll do what I can," she said softly. As he turned back to his work, Lisa glanced up at the branches again. A soft gust of wind passed through, sending a shiver down the bark that made the faint markings glint like dew. And for a moment, just a heartbeat, she thought she heard a whisper under the rustling leaves. Not words, just sound. A hum, low and deep, like the heartbeat of something old. Chapter 2. The Lost Tradition. The attic always smelled the same, cedar, dust, and the faint perfume of old paper. Lisa sneezed as she pushed open the wooden hatch and climbed up, the narrow ladder creaking beneath her. "Careful," Grandma Emma called from below. "Don't step on the boxes labeled linens." "I swear I just got those organized." "Define organized," Lisa teased, dodging a stack of hat boxes that seemed to be leaning toward rebellion. She flicked on a lamp and the attic came to life. Old trunks, stacks of yellowing newspapers, a rocking horse missing one eye, and boxes labeled Feast Decor 1982 and Do Not Throw Away Seriously, Emma. Lisa smiled. "You've got enough history up here to start a museum." "Don't tempt me," Emma said, climbing up behind her with surprising agility for a woman in her 70s. "Half this stuff belongs to the old feast committee. Back before we turned it into a harvest extravaganza, as Mayor Talbot calls it." She wrinkled her nose. "I liked it better when it was just about food, family, and being thankful." Lisa brushed dust off a wooden trunk. "You mean before the bounce houses and corporate sponsors?" "Exactly. The feast used to be a real community thing. Everyone brought something from their own harvest, bread, jam, cider. We'd gather under the oak, say a few words of thanks, and share what we had." She sighed, sitting on an old crate. "Funny how the more the town prospered, the less we remembered why." Lisa smiled softly. "Maybe that's part of what's wrong with the tree." Emma gave her a look that was half skepticism, half intrigue. "What do you mean?" "Everything in this town used to center around gratitude. The feast, the tree, the traditions. But now it's all raffles and photo ops. Maybe the oak's just..." Lisa hesitated, aware of how silly it sounded. "Lonely." Emma chuckled, but her eyes softened. "You always did have a poetic streak." They spent the next hour sorting through old feast decorations. Hand-painted banners, brass candle holders, a stack of wooden plates etched with leaf designs. Then Lisa noticed something wedged behind a crate, a leather-bound book, the cover worn smooth and stamped with the initials TW. "What's this?" she asked, pulling it free. Emma squinted. "Oh, my stars. That belonged to Tobias Wilson, one of the town's founders." Lisa opened it carefully, the pages delicate and yellowed. The handwriting was neat, looping. She read aloud. Each year we honor the oak that shelters us. Beneath its boughs we leave our thanks, not in words alone, but in deeds and offerings. For as long as we remember, we will be remembered. Emma crossed her arms. I'll be. I thought that was just a saying my mother made up. There's more, Lisa said, turning the page. He writes about the gifts of gratitude, bread, honey, cider, things made by hand. Says they used to place them under the oak every Thanksgiving Eve, before the feast began. Well, that's new to me, Emma said. That must have stopped generations ago. Do you think it was symbolic, or something else? Emma gave a little shrug. In a town like this? Probably both. Our ancestors were big on ceremony. They didn't separate faith from farming, or nature from thankfulness. Everything was one big circle. Lisa closed the book thoughtfully. So what happens if the circle breaks? Emma smiled, her eyes crinkling. Then someone's got to patch it up, I suppose. Lisa looked back at the journal, tracing Tobias Wilson's looping script. The words seemed to glow faintly in the lamplight, or maybe that was just her imagination. Still, something about that simple line lodged in her heart like a seed. For as long as we remember, we will be remembered. She didn't know yet what it meant, but she had the strange, certain feeling that it was the key to everything. Chapter 3. The Failing Harvest. By the next morning, the whole town was buzzing with rumors, and not the cheerful, who's baking the best pie, kind. Lisa first heard the news at the farmer's market. Mrs. Porter's stall, normally overflowing with jars of cranberry jam and honey, looked bare. She was sitting behind it, arms crossed, scowling at a basket of withered apples. Morning, Mrs. Porter, Lisa said carefully. Rough week? Mrs. Porter sighed. Rough season, more like. My hives collapsed. Bees just up and vanished. She looked up, her eyes sharp. It's that tree, mark my words. Same thing happened in '67, before the Great Freeze. Lisa frowned. I thought that was just bad weather. Maybe, maybe not. The woman leaned closer, voice low. My grandmother used to say the oak was our guardian. If it sickens, we all feel it. You watch, there will be more. Lisa thanked her and walked on, trying to shake off the conversation. But by midday, she'd heard the same thing from nearly everyone she passed. The miller's pumpkin patch had turned to mush overnight, the apple orchard was losing its last crop before harvest, even the flowers at the church garden were drooping. By the time she reached the square, her scientific brain was whirring like a hive of its own. Mark was there, sanding the edge of a booth, his flannel sleeves rolled up and a smear of sawdust across one cheek. He looked up when he saw her. You've got that look, he said. The one that says you found something weird and you're about to ruin my day with it. Depends, she said. How do you feel about mass agricultural decline? He groaned. That bad, huh? Worse. It's too widespread for disease, and the weather's been mild. Whatever's happening, it's hitting everything at once. He leaned on the sawhorse. You think it's connected to the oak? Lisa hesitated. I think the timing's suspicious. But I'm not ready to start blaming tree spirits just yet. Mark smirked. You say that like you don't want to. I'm a scientist. I don't want to believe in magic. But you kind of do. She gave him a look, and he laughed. Fine, fine. What's your plan? I'm going to test the soil. Maybe there's contamination, or something affecting the water table. He nodded, pulling off his work gloves. I'll help. I can dig. She smiled. You're hired. They worked until late afternoon, taking soil samples from around the oak and near the edge of the old creek bed. The ground was dry, crumbly, and lifeless. Mark knelt beside one of the roots, brushing dirt from a deep crack in the bark. You ever notice these markings look like veins? He asked. Yeah, Lisa said softly. It's almost like the tree's trying to tell us something. He looked at her, one eyebrow raised. That's a pretty mystical statement for a scientist. I said almost. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he might be right. There was something intentional about the patterns, something rhythmic. And when the breeze rustled through the branches, the sound wasn't the usual dry whisper of leaves. It was more like a sigh. A tired one. That evening, she sat at her grandmother's kitchen table, surrounded by test tubes, notebooks, and mugs of cooling tea. Emma watched from across the table, knitting needles clicking softly. You look like your mother when you're thinking, Emma said fondly. Except she never made quite such a mess. Lisa smiled. I just can't find a logical reason for all this. The soil's fine, the pH is normal, there's no sign of fungus or pests. It's like the oak, and everything else, is just losing its spark. Emma's knitting paused. Maybe it's not the land that's lost something. Maybe it's us. Lisa glanced up. You mean because we stopped the old traditions? I mean because we stopped thanking the land, Emma said simply. Your generation's good at fixing things, honey, but not so good at appreciating them. Lisa let that sink in. She wanted to argue, but the truth was, there was something hollow about the town lately. Everyone was busy, distracted, disconnected. Maybe the feast used to mean something deeper than an excuse for pie and a parade. Emma went back to her knitting. You remember what that old journal said? She asked. So long as we remember. Lisa finished it softly, we will be remembered. Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the windows. For just a second, she thought she heard something faint beneath it, like a hum, almost a heartbeat, drifting from the direction of the oak. Chapter 4. The Hidden Time Capsule. Lisa wasn't sure what woke her, the wind or the dream. In it, she'd been standing beneath the great oak, watching its roots pulse faintly with light, like a heartbeat beneath the soil. She'd felt the ground hum through her bare feet, a sound both warning and plea. When she woke, her clock read 3:14 a.m. and the whisper of branches outside her window sounded almost like her name. By morning, she had convinced herself it was just stress or maybe too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Still, the feeling clung to her like mist as she headed to the library. The Oak Hill Historical Society kept their records in a narrow, cedar-scented room behind the stacks. Lisa knew the librarian, Mr. Delaney, would talk her ear off if she didn't have a clear excuse for being there, so she came prepared. Good morning, she said brightly, holding up her coffee. I'm researching environmental changes around the Oak Hill property. He adjusted his spectacles, clearly delighted by the prospect of anyone under 40 showing interest in town history. The old oak. You know, there's a rumor that during the first Harvest Festival, the founders buried a time capsule at its base. Lisa's heart thumped. Really? What kind of time capsule? Oh, nobody knows. The records say it contained letters, artifacts, maybe some sort of token of gratitude for the land. That was back in 1884. But the exact spot was lost when the area flooded the next spring. She leaned forward. Do you have a copy of those records? Mr. Delaney's eyes twinkled. I might. He disappeared into a back cabinet, humming as he rifled through files. When he returned, he handed her a weathered folder labeled Founders Feast 1884. Correspondence. The first letter inside made her breath hitch. To those who come after. We give thanks to the spirit of the grove, who shelters and sustains. May this offering remind you that the bond between us and the land must be renewed, else both will fade. Signed, the founders of Oak Hill. It wasn't just superstition, it was a promise. That afternoon, she found Mark behind the festival stage, building a frame for the pie table. You ever heard of the town founders burying something under the oak? She asked. He brushed sawdust from his hands. Only that they were weird about it. My granddad said his dad refused to let anyone dig near it. Why? Because I think the answer to what's happening is down there. He stared at her. You want to dig up the town's oldest tree? Not the tree, she said quickly. Just around it, carefully. He sighed, but there was amusement in his voice. You really do have a talent for turning my weekend into manual labor. By dusk, they were at the edge of the oak's roots with shovels, flashlights, and a thermos of coffee that smelled like determination and bad decisions. The earth was tougher than it looked. Hard-packed, tangled with roots, full of stubborn rocks. They worked in companionable silence, their breath misting in the cool air. After about an hour, Mark's shovel hit something that clanged. They froze. Please tell me that was a rock, he said. Rocks don't echo, Lisa whispered. Together, they brushed away the dirt until a small metal box appeared. Rusted, dented, but unmistakably man-made. It was about the size of a loaf of bread, bound with what looked like iron filigree. Mark whistled low. Well, hello there, history. They carried it to the porch of Emma's house, setting it on a towel. Lisa found a flathead screwdriver and pried it open. Inside were letters, brittle and yellowed, sealed with wax. A small tin of seeds completely dried. And one other object, resting at the bottom, a smooth, carved token of wood shaped like an acorn. Lisa turned it over in her palm. On the underside, etched in tiny letters, was a phrase, so long as we remember. Mark finished it quietly, we will be remembered. They looked at each other. Lisa felt a pulse beneath her fingertips, faint, like static, but alive. And for just a moment, the scent of oak leaves filled the air, warm, green, ancient. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Pact. Emma watched from her armchair as Lisa turned the small wooden acorn over and over in her hand. The kitchen light caught the delicate grain in the wood, it shimmered faintly, as if it held its own glow. Well, Emma said, setting down her knitting. That's not the kind of thing you find buried every day. Lisa nodded, her voice quiet. The letters mention an offering, something about renewing a bond with the land. I think this was part of it. Mark leaned on the counter, sipping coffee. You think the founders made a deal with the tree? Maybe not a deal, Lisa said. Maybe a partnership. A promise to care for the land in return for its protection. Emma gave a little hum. Your great-grandfather used to say the same thing. He believed the oak was the heart of Oak Hill. Said if it ever fell, the town would lose its luck. Lisa smiled faintly. And now the harvest is failing. Feels like we broke our end of the bargain. Mark tilted his head. So what do we do? Write the tree an apology letter? Funny, she said, but maybe not too far off. Later that night, Lisa sat at her desk surrounded by open books and notes, tracing every mention of the oak through town history. The founders' journal spoke often of gratitude, of the feast being more than a festival. We give thanks not in word but in offering, not for bounty received, but for harmony maintained. Some of the later entries grew darker. Few attend the ritual now. The spirit sleeps. We forget, and it forgets us. She rubbed her temples, whispering, the spirit sleeps. Was that what she'd felt under her feet the night before? The faint pulse, the hum? Something ancient, waiting to be remembered? The next morning, she and Mark stood under the oak again. The air felt heavy, not ominous, but weighted, like the pause before rain. Lisa knelt and placed the wooden acorn at the base of the trunk. If this is connected to the harvest, maybe returning it helps restore balance, she said. Mark nodded. And if not? Then we've just buried an acorn twice. Low stakes. He grinned. I like your optimism. They buried the acorn carefully, then stood back. Nothing happened at first. The wind rustled through the branches, and a few tired leaves fell. But as the last one drifted down, the air seemed to shift, a subtle warmth, the smell of green things returning. Mark frowned. You feel that? Lisa nodded. Yeah, like the first breath of spring. That evening, Emma was sitting on the porch when she noticed the lights in town flicker, once, twice, and then stabilize. She looked toward the horizon where the fields lay and saw a faint shimmer rolling across them, like moonlight on water. The next morning, the market was buzzing again, but this time, with joy. Mrs. Porter's bees had returned. The miller's pumpkins had plumped overnight. Even the church flowers stood bright and open again. When Lisa walked through town, people called out thank yous, though none of them quite knew why. Mark joined her, a smudge of dirt on his cheek and a smile that looked like relief. Guess your science project worked. She laughed softly. Guess it did. Then she looked back toward the oak. The golden light through its branches seemed a little richer, the leaves a little greener. And for just a heartbeat, she swore she heard a soft sigh, contented this time. That night, Lisa wrote in her notebook. Maybe gratitude is its own kind of magic. The kind that doesn't need to be seen, only remembered. Chapter 6. The feast returns. The morning of the feast dawned golden and crisp. The kind of autumn morning that made the whole town smell like wood smoke and cider. For the first time in years, the square was alive before sunrise. Families carried baskets of food, kids strung paper garlands between booths, and the town band tuned their instruments beneath the gazebo. But this year, the decorations were different, simpler. No glitter, no loud banners. Just garlands of dried herbs, candles in jars, and bunches of wheat tied with ribbons. It felt right. Mark arrived carrying a crate of pumpkins so big he had to set them down with a dramatic grunt. Okay, Lisa, he said, straightening up, if gratitude is a form of exercise, I think I just burned a year's worth. She laughed. They're perfect. Everyone's bringing something natural, something from their garden, or something handmade. You know, he said, looking around, it feels like the town's waking up again. It does, she agreed softly. Like it remembered how to breathe. When the sun reached its highest point, the music quieted and the crowd gathered near the oak. For the first time in living memory, there was a moment of silence. Mayor Jenkins, usually a man of long-winded speeches, simply said, Today, we give thanks, not just for what we have, but for the land that gives it. Then he stepped aside, and Lisa, to her utter horror, found everyone looking at her. Mark nudged her gently. Go on, he whispered. You're the one who started this. Lisa swallowed hard, then stepped forward. The oak loomed behind her, its branches swaying like it was listening. I used to think gratitude was something we said, she began. Something polite, a habit, but this year taught me it's something we do. It's remembering that we're part of something bigger. That when we care for the land, it cares for us. Her voice caught slightly, but she smiled. So let's make today about more than a feast. Let's make it a promise. Afterward, people began leaving small tokens at the base of the oak, hand-carved charms, bundles of herbs, even a few notes of thanks tucked into the roots. Children placed their drawings there, some of trees, others of fields and rivers. As dusk settled, candles flickered in a circle around the oak, and music floated through the air. Couples danced, kids chased each other through the grass, and the scent of roasting turkey drifted on the breeze. Lisa stood beside Mark, watching it all. "You think it'll last this time?" she asked. He smiled. "If we keep remembering? Yeah, I think it will." They stood quietly as the stars came out, the oak's leaves whispering overhead. For just a moment, a single acorn fell between them, smooth and warm, almost glowing in the firelight. Lisa picked it up and placed it in Mark's hand. "For next year," she said. He grinned. "Guess that means I'm stuck helping again." "You were already stuck." They both laughed, and somewhere deep in the heart of the oak, a soft hum rose, content, eternal. As the feast carried on, Lisa looked around at the town she loved, alive, grateful, whole again, and wrote one last note in her journal that night. "The oak remembers us now." 1 year later, the next autumn arrived gentler than anyone could remember. The summer had been kind, the rains steady, and the fields heavy with crops that seemed to shimmer gold under the sunlight. By the time the feast returned, Oak Hill looked more alive than ever. The square brimmed with laughter, music, and the smell of baking bread. Every window had a candle in it, every porch had a wreath of oak leaves. At the edge of it all, the old tree stood proud, greener, fuller, its branches reaching wide like it was gathering everyone close. Lisa sat on the same porch where she and Mark had opened the time capsule, a mug of cider warming her hands. Mark was setting up tables down in the square, joking with a group of kids as they tried to balance pies on their heads for some reason that only made sense to them. Emma joined her, wrapped in a shawl the color of autumn wine. "Looks like it's going to be another good year," she said. "It already is," Lisa replied, smiling. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the crowd began to gather by the oak again. Someone placed a basket of acorns at its base, a new tradition that had started quietly but caught on quickly. Lisa's heart swelled. "You know," she said softly, "it's funny how something as simple as saying thank you can change everything." Emma chuckled. The land just needed to hear it. So did we. When Lisa joined Mark by the oak, the light of dusk filtered through the branches in a golden haze. He handed her a candle. "Ready to do it again?" he asked. "Always." Together, they lit their candles and placed them among the others. The soft glow spread, until the whole base of the oak shimmered like a crown of stars. The music began again, slow, old, full of memory, and laughter rose into the night. Lisa looked up, and for just an instant, she thought she saw movement in the leaves. Not wind, something like a shimmer of green light, faint but joyful, rippling through the branches. Mark followed her gaze. "Did you see that?" "Maybe," she said, smiling. "Or maybe the oak's just happy." He nodded, slipping his hand into hers. "Then we're doing something right." The branches swayed, whispering softly, a sound that might have been the wind, or something older, content to remain unseen. And above the hum of the feast, Lisa could have sworn she heard a voice, warm and deep, carried on the breeze. "So long as you remember." She whispered back, "We will." The candles flickered, the stars burned bright, and Oak Hill, small, stubborn, grateful Oak Hill, thrived beneath the watchful arms of its ancient oak once more. If you enjoyed the Feast of Oak Hill, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps others find our cozy little corner of YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe for more original stories filled with mystery, folklore, and a touch of magic. Hit the bell so you'll never miss a new tale, and remember, so long as we remember, we will be remembered.